I really like this image because it's got a lot of life to it, I think, a lot of movement. And the reason for that is nothing has been painted exactly. That it's all very loose. Everything is just suggested. You know, the boat on the far left, that's got a proper boat shape, but the rest of it is just a suggestion, and it's just a mass of abstract shapes all sort of melted into one. So that's what I'm going to try and do. It's very difficult to actually let go of putting details in that are not there. You know, there is no details there. So if I make the boats more boaty, you know, I'm making it up, and unless I'm an expert in painting boats, you know, it's just going to look odd. So I'm better off to follow what's going on here and let the viewer's imagination fill in the gaps. So that could be a good title for the video, I think. And this is a hybrid image. I've just coined that term. Basically, it's one of my photos of a harbour town in Wales, Aberavon. Obviously, this is nothing like Aberavon. And one of my watercolour paintings, and I've combined the two images to come up with this. So there we go. So I'm going to try and capture the atmosphere that attracted me to this scene. So I think we need a lot of mixing on the paper and really letting go of detail. So I've used a little bit of yellow ochre there and a bit of cobalt blue, but literally, as you can see there, just staining the paper. I'll go a little bit dark at the top there. This is 9 inches by 12 inches. And I've coined a phrase, hybrid reference image, which this is what I'm referring to. And basically, I googled it. I couldn't see anyone else using this term. That I've got this image from Midjourney, which is a mixture of one of my paintings and one of my own reference pictures. So there we go. I'm sure other people have done that as well, but maybe I'm the first to use that term, hybrid reference image. So there we go. That's what I'm doing. And I've been doing a lot of these images and I really like them. Even to the point where I'm going to have to figure out how I can go back to painting from just photographs, because these images I find so good and so inspiring to paint demos from. But I am learning a lot from these images about what potentially makes a good and a bad painting. So I regret not rubbing out that line there a little bit. Never mind. I might be able to rub it out, but we'll see. So that distant hill has got a warm haziness to it. A lot of wet into wet. And gradual colour transitions, which is going to add to that effect of atmosphere. So getting the light values in first. I think I shall save the white of the paper for that boat there. So like as I said in the beginning, this image is quite interesting because I like it. It's got a lot of atmosphere, I think, and but nothing is concrete. The only thing that's concrete here is really the shape of that boat, maybe the figures, but everything else is just suggested, really. And I think I shall put a wash on the ground. So they're all fairly muted colours, but they go from warm to cool again, which I think is emphasising that feeling of the time of day. Maybe it's early morning or late evening. I think everything else we're going to need some harder edges, so I'll dry that off. So we generally paint light to dark with watercolour. So again, along this wall here, but I dried it because I want a hard edge, that I don't necessarily want this to bleed into the harbour, the water there. Bit of wet into wet there. And we'll be doing another layer over this, put some darker areas, so this is preparation for later. Some cool, keep with the theme where we've got use of warm and cool. And we've got the light on the front of this building, which we'll need to paint first and then let it dry, and then we can put the darker areas over. And maybe one of the reasons this appeals to me is because it is, although it looks really busy, there's no complex shapes on here really, they're just basic shapes. And this is going to be a really difficult painting, I'll tell you now, if you decide to give it a go, because you just really have to let go of those urges to put detail in that you can't actually see, so you're just going to make it up, and it's really difficult to fight that. But if you just paint what you see, as in not necessarily a house here, I see a shape there, and another shape there, and just random shapes. Some grey. Again, to put the lighter values on, which I'll then come back and put the darker values. Remember, plenty of white paper left behind, perhaps in this area where the a lot of the action is. It adds sparkle, gives you the opportunity to turn things into boats or whatever. And cars on the harbour. I'll switch to a smaller brush, and I think I'll use this Skoda Perla for these nice little flicks here and there. So it's still mega hot here in France at the moment. Everything's all drying up. So we've covered the paper pretty much and put the lighter values in, and now we'll put in the mid-tones and the darker values. So I'm adding more paint to water ratio. So for instance, over here we've got the harbour with suggestion of the stonework, and we can use that to paint around the boat. Again, just to sort that shape out. But this is a long way away from us standing here looking across the harbour, so it's not going to be masses of detail. I'll just perhaps throw some brown in there as well. Let it mix on the paper. I'll use water to soften some edges. I've got absolutely no idea what I'm painting here. I'm just painting shapes. And like I say, it's going to be really difficult for you to do that. Let go of painting things. Like I say, there's nothing here in this image, but it looks okay. You know, it looks better than okay, I think. You know, it's really nice. But how is that when there's actually nothing been painted? How does that work? So hopefully you're enjoying the video. Please do hit that like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. And if you've been watching me for a while, you might be interested in joining me on my website membership. And on tier 2 currently, to celebrate a couple of milestones we'll be hitting soon on my both my channels. Hopefully hitting 15,000 subscribers on my oil channel and 30,000 subscribers on my watercolor channel. Hoping to get to 100,000 subscribers on each of these channels. So if you can help me by liking and subscribing, that'd be much appreciated. But as a thank you for all your support, there's a 30% off annual memberships, so you might want to take advantage of that. It's a limited time offer. So don't forget to hit the like and subscribe. Enjoy the video, and I shall see you on the memberships, hopefully on a live stream. Because we've got colour harmony, there's a nice design. If we look at the black and white image, you know, the eye travels into the painting and we have areas of contrast. We have just enough information that this is a boat by having that hull shape. And we can get away with it not being perfect by painting one shape into the next shape and let them all just melt together. Just things, bits and bobs. And you'll find, you know, if you have a go at this, you'll then use these methods in your sort of normal work, shall we say, when you're painting things that you can see what it is, but you perhaps leave a little bit to the imagination, you know, by not making it so detailed. And then you start to add in you know, art into your artwork. And see, this is the Mid-Journey is going to get the credit for this, for the design, but I'm learning. I went through all my reference images that I've printed off over the years for demos. A lot of them I've already done, so I don't necessarily need them, but I chucked a lot of them away because they're not actually necessarily, all of them, good designs for paintings. You know, they're just copies of photographs, and or you know, just a photograph without the right content for a good painting. Again, using these darks to connect things up, lose detail. No, again, no idea what I'm painting here, but if you were to look at a harbour with, say, 30 boats all crammed in together here, would you know, see more than what's there? And it doesn't look like anything here to me, but you know, once the painting's done, take away the reference image, the viewer would just look at this and think, wow, how did he do all those detailed boats? Well, that's the hope anyway. But for me, the important thing is to make sure I just connect it all up. I've got a boat there. So a lot of painting this wet into wet and so on is to get that softness. It hides things, makes it look not detailed, which is the look we're going for. And I think this sort of style is what attracted me to Edward Seago. That a lot of his watercolours are like this, where you can't really honestly say, you know, what did he actually paint there, but it looks good. You know it's a boat, you know it's a figure on the beach or something, but it's not actually rendered perfectly. But it looks better than perfect because it, you know, gives you the opportunity to imagine. And opportunity for a bit of colour. Again, what am I doing? Maybe a figure. See, it's at that perhaps golden hour again, so you know things are being lit up with a warm glow. There's posts on the harbour there. Opportunity to just put light and dark. So my aim with all of this, and you know, hopefully I'll take a lot of you with me on this journey, is to be able to have a photograph in front of me that's perhaps quite boring, and then use the skills I've learned over the years to make it into a beautiful painting, which is what people like Sargent and Seago could do. But they didn't do it overnight, and nor will we. But I'm sure we can. So now we're creating a sense of light with these strong shadows. And instead of just doing a straight line across there, which will look quite boring, it's just make it more abstract. Not sure what this building is, but it doesn't matter. Leave a bit of that painting underneath to shine through. We've got some white paper there, and don't underestimate how valuable that is. I can retain that. Let's use water to connect some of this up. And that's what you should always be thinking about, is your connection. Again, I've got no idea what's here. Just the blue shape. Could be another building. Just a bit too much water there, but and I wonder, you know, if you, when you first saw this image before you knew the demo, that we're not actually painting anything of structure. I bet you thought it was a, you know, a very detailed painting, and I followed the image very closely, and because that's what it will look like, I'm sure. The dark there. But maybe that's just a little bit too perfect. Let's just soften there. Make a little bit less of it. A window. These lanterns. And what did I just paint there? A couple of shapes. So let's connect this building to this wall here. So we can do that. It's still damp there. More cars maybe. Soften the distance there. Soften that. It's connected up into there. Maybe that's a big tree there. Maybe not. So let's bring that across here. Connection. So just be careful. I added a lot of water there. Caused a bit of a run back, but let's just give it all a bit of a spray. So back to what we were doing, which was connecting this wall to everything else. There we've got stones that get bigger and change colour. And also just make sure you start with an accurate drawing. A lot of these mid-journey images, hybrid images as we call them now, aren't always accurate from the point of view of perspective or whatever, but they are enough. And what I mean by that, if it looks okay, it'll be okay. If it doesn't look right, then I prompt plenty of excuse me, I prompt plenty of images that just don't look right. So obviously I just put them in the bin, those ones. But the ones that look good, and I think, yeah, I'd like to paint that, they're the ones we go with. So just putting water on here. I want to try and create that look of stone. Let's get some grey in there. We've got some stones on the other side of the harbour. Again, that's just another way to connect. And it's much darker, but still steering towards red. It's a warm painting, this is. So by doing this while the paper's damp here, I'll get a soft edge, which will make that look further away. But maybe where it started to dry here a little bit, we'll get a harder edge. Using noticed downward strokes. Which will help say that this ball goes like that. And we've got the shadow under there. So this is again play of the cool colours, warm and cool. Got a lot of warmth in here, and then things go a little bit cooler. And we've got the suggestion of it's been raining with those puddles. And again, like when we do the boats, I'm painting this into the base of the harbour wall to add connection. And it gets a little bit fainter, a little bit lighter in value as it goes up to here. Connecting that with a soft edge before it dries completely. So it is tricky when it's hot watercolour because everything just dries so quick. Again, horizontal marks I've used there. Few darks in there, and maybe the gaps between the rocks there. But be careful, you know, you're inventing detail that is unnecessary, and you can spoil the whole effect. As long as it's not a hard edge, I think we'll be okay. Throwing some water on there, we're going to get runbacks and whatever else. Dry that off. So the image has got the structure now, and it actually looks quite good. I think that it's kind of what I wanted. So all I've got to do now is put in the details, which will perhaps be another car off in the distance, the figures, the masts, a few flags, some seagulls, and we're done. The key is not to overdo the detail. And a lot of this rigging won't be right from the point of view of even the reference image, but we can use these techniques with our reference images once we've figured out how we can paint loose like this and get detail, and we'll have the accurate detail of those masts and so on. So don't worry about these images if they're not perfect. If it's perfect from the point of view of the looseness, but again, you'll be surprised how much you can get away with by painting, you know, loose like this, of how much detail you actually need. You know, why does, you know, if you're thinking about, you know, doing artwork to sell, you know, why will someone buy your painting? Because it makes them feel something, and that's probably because of your brushwork, your interpretation of the scene, not because you've got the rigging right. You know, unless the person is into sailing, and that's very important to them. But I'm sure most of us, we're not painting in a view that we want necessarily to sell our artwork. We're painting for the pure enjoyment of it, and for ourselves to have an image that we're pleased with. So that's a car off in the distance, believe it or not. It's in keeping with the rest of the painting. It's just a little flick here and there. And when you make these marks, you'll have to fight against it because it's just so strong. Think, oh, I must correct that. I must do something better than that. That's not good enough, or that's going to look silly. But you just got to not do that. Just leave it there. That's now a car. We've got an area of light here. That's opportunity for a ladder there, maybe. Painted Aberrare on a few times, and that's what's there. So let's do the figures. Which will have them perhaps walking towards us. Got a couple of figures there. Maybe we'll put some up in the distance as well. It's a busy harbour. So the photograph I used was actually Aberrare on. Obviously it's nothing like Aberrare on really, but that's fine. So I'll give this guy a jacket. I'll just use water at the top just to lighten it, so a bit of light on his shoulders. A bit of water down here for the t-shirt, but the light is on the front of it in there. Give him some hair. Person behind him, maybe. I've got some very much dried up, I'm not sure what that is. But, it's another different colour. People off in the distance. Someone coming out of a building over there. That leg looks a bit funny. It's just... It's always the way with watercolour, you get this far with the whole painting and then you mess up that last figure. So, we just need some seagulls now. Opportunity to dot a little bit of colour about, a bit of red here and there, maybe a bit of orange, some hands of yellow here, some red. maybe just one or two little highlights. So thick gouache straight from the tube. On top of his head there. And just by doing that, that then becomes a car. There we go. No detail painted, and I've got the effect that I wanted. The lesson learned there is to understand that you don't need to paint everything so literal. And in actual fact, it can create something very artistic. Let's have a quick little look to see if we can find any real detailed bits in this painting. So that's about as detailed as it's got, which is just the shape of the hull, but the rest of the boat isn't there. You know, we can't even really see whether that mast belongs to that boat or that one. You know, again, just a suggestion of the hull, a little highlight on there, contrast light and dark. And you could argue that little ladder there that I put is potentially detail. You know, these cars, it's just a suggestion of perhaps, you know, that is that a windscreen, you know, that's the headlight maybe. Some figures. The building is just a show of light and shadow. Now this is probably the most detailed part of the painting, the boat there, only because the boat shape is there. But again, there's no detail on there, there's no real hard edges, it's all very soft, but that is enough to give the illusion that, you know, it is a harbour. Figures there, again, have I drawn one or two legs, you know, the other leg's behind the other leg, it gives that impression that they're walking, they're moving. And lots of sparkle, and the sparkle doesn't just have to be white paper. You know, we have got a lot of white paper on here, which is why it's got a lot of sparkle, so I did add a little bit of white gouache as well. But you know, this is also sparkle, I consider, where I've left the lighter value of that pink with the dark against it. It just adds that contrast. But you know, we step back from it and it all comes together. But a nice strong lead in there, which if we had lots of hard edges along here, would perhaps, you know, detract from the scene and lose the overall softness. But because we've got a soft edge here, and you know, where does the dark finish and where does the shadow part end and so on, it's all soft. But it's got the combination of the hard and soft edges, which again adds that bit of interest. Again, hard edges here, light against dark. So there we go, that's enough rambling. Good luck if you decide to give it a go. It's not easy. It's actually easier to paint the detail. Obviously, if you get the detail right, yeah, it'll look photographic, and but it'll look very static. It's actually very difficult to let go in this way, to just paint shapes, let one shape melt into the next shape. You paint the shape, it's not quite right, but it does the job. You know, this shape is just putting a dark next to a light. You know, so it doesn't matter whether, you know, that shape is slightly wrong or whatever. You know, and over here, you know, what's going on here, it's just a blob, but it works. So until next time, bye for now. So there you go. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Check out my link in the description to my website, see if that's for you, and take a great advantage of this offer of 30% off annual memberships, which makes it very affordable. And there's watercolour and oils, or both, whichever you want to do.